You are nothing without us. We made this fortune, and you'll watch it burn before we let you destroy it." Those were my husband's trembling words to our only son, Daniel, as the lawyer read the final version of our will. And Daniel, our pride, our heir, the boy we once believed would protect our legacy, just laughed. He looked straight into my eyes, smirking, and said, "You built millions from nothing, but now it's mine. The estate, the company, the wealth, you can't stop me." The room fell silent. Even the lawyer's hands froze above the papers. In that moment, I felt something inside me shatter. I wasn't looking at my son anymore. I was staring at a stranger blinded by arrogance. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened next left even the lawyer speechless. You see, our story didn't begin with mansions, cars, or private accounts. It began with two immigrants who scrubbed floors, worked night shifts, and saved every penny. We built an empire brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice. And all of it, every sleepless night, every risk we took, was for Daniel. But when fortune finally came, so did the change. Wealth, which was supposed to secure our family's future, poisoned our son's heart. By the time he turned 30, he wasn't the grateful boy who once held our hands. He was a man convinced the world owed him everything. And on the day of the will's reading, he crossed a line no parent should ever witness. Because Daniel didn't just claim the inheritance, he spat on the legacy that cost us everything to build. What he didn't know was that the will he was so sure of carried a secret he would never forget. I still remember the first years of our struggle. My husband and I arrived in this country with nothing but a suitcase, a few dollars, and a dream that one day our family would live with dignity. We worked endless shifts. He labored in construction sites under the burning sun, and I cleaned houses where people barely looked at me. At night, we counted coins just to make rent. There were nights when I washed hair for 12 hours straight, my fingers raw and swollen, just to keep the lights on in our tiny shop. My husband stayed in the back room experimenting with formulas, his eyes burning from exhaustion. We lived on instant noodles, skipped vacations, and wore the same clothes for years because every cent went back into the business. People laughed at us, saying we would never make it, that beauty was a luxury no one truly needed. But we proved them wrong. Every scar on my hands, every sleepless night was a step toward the empire we eventually built. That's why his words cut so deep. Because I knew exactly what it cost us to create this fortune. But slowly, through determination, we carved our path. My husband saw opportunity where others saw risk. He bought a tiny piece of land no one wanted, saying, "One day, this will be worth more than we can imagine." He was right. That land became the cornerstone of our real estate business, the empire that would later be called Vance Estates. The early years of Vance Estates were nothing glamorous. My husband drove a rusty truck filled with tools while I handled the books at our kitchen table, bills scattered beside a single flickering lamp. We painted walls ourselves, hammered nails with blistered hands, and begged banks for small loans that no one believed we could repay. But each property sold gave us hope. Each handshake with a client was proof that our sacrifices were not in vain. With each year, our sacrifices multiplied into success. The company grew. Properties turned into wealth. And with that wealth came security, influence, and a reputation we never dreamed possible. People began to call us self-made millionaires. Yet, behind every dollar earned was a lesson in humility. We never forgot where we came from. We donated to charities, helped families in need, and paid for scholarships. We wanted Daniel to grow up with the values of gratitude and perseverance. I remember taking him to orphanages when he was a boy, showing him children with nothing. I would kneel beside him and say, "This is why we work, not for greed, but to give." He nodded, but his eyes were already distracted by the toys and clothes we could afford. Even when we tried to ground him, life shielded him. He never walked barefoot on cold floors. He never felt hunger gnawing at his stomach. And maybe that was our greatest mistake, loving him too much to let him struggle. But somewhere along the way, something broke. While other children learned the meaning of effort, Daniel was shielded by luxury. He never knew hunger. He never felt the weight of a bill unpaid. Instead of gratitude, he learned entitlement. At school, teachers would call us, worried about his behavior. "He's bright," they said, "but he refuses to follow rules. He believes he's above them." We dismissed it at first. We thought maturity would come. But as our fortune grew, so did his arrogance. There were warnings we ignored. Small lies he told without remorse. Friends he discarded as if people were disposable. Even family gatherings became moments for him to boast about things he hadn't earned. I can still hear my sister whispering to me at Christmas, "Be careful, wealth can spoil a child's heart faster than poverty ever could." I laughed it off, but her words would haunt me later. By the time he graduated college, Daniel wasn't dreaming of building the business with us. He was demanding ownership. He looked at us not as parents, but as obstacles standing in the way of his throne. And then came the day when Daniel made his intentions clear. He didn't want to inherit our legacy. He wanted to claim it now, by force. The confrontation began one evening inside the very home that symbolized our journey, the mansion we once believed was the crown jewel of our hard work. Daniel stood in the living room, his voice echoing against the marble walls. "This house, the company, the estate, it's already mine. Why pretend otherwise?" I looked at him, speechless. My husband clenched his fists, his face pale. "You speak as if we are already gone," he replied, his tone trembling between anger and heartbreak. Daniel smirked. "You don't understand. You built this empire, but you're too old to expand it. You're holding me back. I could triple this wealth if you just hand it over now." I felt tears burn my eyes. Did he not see? Every brick, every dollar, every piece of this fortune was meant to be his one day. But for him, one day was not enough. Our closest friends and business partners began to notice. Board meetings turned into battlegrounds. Daniel interrupted his father, dismissed experienced managers, and bragged about modernizing the empire. But behind his arrogance was recklessness. He invested company funds without approval, threw extravagant parties at our expense, and treated employees like servants. Whispers of betrayal began to spread in the offices of Vance Estates. One evening, after yet another heated argument, he slammed his hand on the dining table so hard the crystal glasses shattered. "If you don't trust me now, I'll take what's mine in court. The inheritance belongs to me. You can't deny it forever." The silence that followed was heavier than any words spoken that night. I looked at my husband, and for the first time in decades, fear crept into his eyes. Fear not of losing money, but of losing the son we had sacrificed everything for. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if wealth had cursed us. Was this what we had fought for? To raise a son who saw fortune not as a legacy, but as a weapon against his own family? And as the days passed, his threats only grew bolder. Until the morning we received a letter from the family lawyer. Daniel had already made his move. The letter summoned us to the lawyer's office. I still remember the weight of the envelope, the cold seal pressed against my fingertips. When we arrived, Daniel was already seated at the long mahogany table, leaning back in his chair like a king awaiting his coronation. His smirk widened when he saw us. "Finally," he said, "now the truth will be on paper, and you'll see I was right all along." The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. He opened a thick file and adjusted his glasses. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance, Daniel, we are here to discuss the matter of the estate and inheritance clauses." My heart sank. We had always believed the will was clear, everything divided fairly, with protections in place to keep the business intact. But Daniel had found something, or at least he thought he had. He leaned forward, tapping the table with his finger. "According to this clause," he said confidently, "the company shares transition to me immediately. Father wanted it that way. It's all here." The lawyer looked at us, his face pale. "This document appears to have been altered." The room froze. "Altered?" I whispered. The lawyer nodded. "The signature doesn't match. And this clause? It was never in the original draft." My husband slammed his hand on the table. "Daniel, what have you done?" Daniel's smile didn't falter. "I did what you were too afraid to do. I claimed what's mine. The house, the wealth, the company. Father wanted me to have it, and now I do." The arrogance in his voice cut deeper than any blade. For years, we had trusted him. Now, he was openly declaring war against his own blood. I turned to the lawyer, desperate for clarity. "Tell me the truth. Can this forgery stand in court?" The lawyer shook his head slowly. "If exposed, it could destroy Daniel's claim, but proving it will tear this family apart. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Daniel leaned back, unshaken, and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "You can try to fight me, but remember, the court doesn't care about love. It cares about signatures, documents, and power. If you're still with me, stay until the end. The truth will shock you." Because what Daniel didn't realize was that the real will carried a secret no forgery could erase. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. Daniel no longer spoke to us as a son. He spoke only as an adversary. Every word carried venom. Every glance felt like a challenge. Soon, the battle escalated beyond our home. We received letters from his attorneys, filled with accusations that painted us as unfit guardians of the estate. He claimed we were squandering the fortune, that we were incapable of protecting the legacy. I remember the night I confronted him face to face. "Daniel, this isn't about wealth. It's about family. Do you really want to drag your parents into court?" His eyes were cold, unrecognizable. "Family?" he sneered. "Family gave me nothing but rules and lectures. Wealth is all that matters, and wealth belongs to me." My husband stepped forward, voice shaking with fury. "You will destroy everything we built." Daniel's response was a dagger. Then maybe it deserves to be destroyed. The next morning, rumors spread through the company. Trusted employees came to us whispering that Daniel had been holding secret meetings, promising promotions, offering bonuses, and even threatening those who refused to support him. He was building his own kingdom inside Vance Estates. One afternoon, our lawyer revealed something that left me breathless. "Your son is attempting to freeze the company's accounts. If successful, you could lose operational control within weeks." I felt the room spin. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was war. The board of directors demanded explanations. Investors grew restless. Some even sided with Daniel, convinced his boldness meant leadership. Others begged us to find a compromise before the company collapsed under scandal. But compromise was no longer possible. Daniel didn't want partnership. He wanted conquest. The breaking point came at a family gathering. Surrounded by relatives who once admired him, Daniel raised his glass and declared, "Soon Vance Estates will be mine. Father will step aside and I'll finally lead us into the future. No one can stop me now." The room gasped. My hands trembled as I realized our son had publicly declared victory before the war had even begun. But Daniel had underestimated us. Because buried deep in the original will, hidden behind careful legal wording, was a clause he had never seen. And that clause would bring his arrogance crashing down. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back row, their pens ready to capture the downfall of a family once admired. Friends, business partners, and distant relatives all watched as our private nightmare became public spectacle. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, perfectly composed, dressed in an expensive suit, his arrogance radiating like perfume. He looked at us and smirked as though the victory was already his. The judge entered, papers shuffled. The lawyer stood and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, today we reveal the truth behind the Vance estate. The defendant claims sole ownership, but the original will tell a very different story." Daniel's attorney rose quickly. "Objection! That document was revised by Mr. Vance himself." But our lawyer silenced him with one sentence. "Not revised, forged." Gasps echoed through the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." The lawyer placed the original will on the stand, its pages yellowed but intact. He pointed to the section Daniel had fought so hard to conceal. "This clause states that if any heir attempts to seize control of the estate prematurely, through deceit, coercion, or fraud, they forfeit their inheritance entirely." Daniel's face drained of color. For the first time, his confidence cracked. "That's impossible. You can't prove—" Our lawyer interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "Every signature, every seal has been authenticated by experts. This clause is real. And by altering the will, Mr. Daniel Vance has triggered his own disinheritance." The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Relatives whispered in disbelief. I watched Daniel's hands tremble as the reality sank in. All his arrogance, all his schemes, had cost him everything. The judge's gavel struck. "Order! Effective immediately, Daniel Vance is disqualified from receiving any part of the estate. The inheritance will be divided as outlined in the original will. Court is adjourned." Silence followed, heavier than thunder. Daniel stood, his lips quivering with rage. "You can't do this. I'm your son. I deserve everything you built." Tears filled my eyes, but my voice was steady. "No, Daniel, you don't deserve the fortune. Because you never respected the legacy." He stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the marble hall, and just like that, the empire he thought was his vanished before his eyes. If this shocked you, hit the like button. More unbelievable stories are coming. But let me tell you this, justice wasn't the victory we sought. The real victory was seeing the truth exposed. The empire remained, not because of greed, but because of the values we built it on. And Daniel was left with nothing but his own arrogance. When the dust finally settled, silence filled our home like a haunting echo. The courtroom had given us justice, but justice could not heal the wound left in our hearts. Daniel vanished from our lives. No calls, no apologies, only silence. And that silence was louder than any argument we had ever endured. The fortune remained intact. The estate, the properties, the wealth carefully built over decades. But at what cost? A son lost to greed, a family broken by betrayal. I often walk through the halls of our mansion, my hand brushing the walls we once dreamed of. They no longer feel like symbols of victory. They feel like tombstones of a dream that died the day Daniel chose arrogance over love. Sometimes I pause in front of the portraits hanging in the main hall. There is one of Daniel as a boy, smiling wide, his eyes full of innocence. I ask myself if that child is gone forever, or if arrogance buried him so deep we will never see him again. Those pictures remind me that behind every betrayal lies a memory of love, and that is the wound that never closes. We used to imagine handing him the keys to the empire, watching him protect the legacy we sacrificed everything to build. Instead, we watched him walk away with empty hands, carrying nothing but pride and resentment. And yet, I do not regret what we did. The clause was not written to punish, it was written to protect. To remind anyone who carried our name that fortune without values is worthless. Sometimes I wonder, if we had raised him differently, would things have changed? If he had known hunger or faced rejection, would he have valued sacrifice more? Or was arrogance always waiting inside him, awakened the moment fortune arrived? Wealth is a double-edged sword. It can shelter you, or it can blind you. It can build bridges or burn them to ashes. And Daniel chose the fire. Today, the company thrives under the guidance of people who understand sacrifice. People who respect the blood and sweat poured into every brick. The legacy survives even if our family does not. But even in that survival, there is emptiness. Success feels different when the person you built it for is no longer by your side. Nights at the dinner table are quieter. Celebrations feel incomplete, because you can rebuild money, but you cannot rebuild trust once it has been shattered. Inheritances can divide families, but the truth always comes to light. And when it does, it cuts sharper than any blade. So I ask you, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you protect the fortune even if it meant losing your child? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want more shocking inheritance stories, keep watching this playlist. Because in the end, money fades, but betrayal leaves scars no inheritance can heal.